Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rem and Sam podcast. If you guys were paying attention and locked in on the Tuesday episode, you know there's no Sam for this weekend. He will be back next weekend with a special guest. Are we cooking up a special episode? I don't know. I think it's going to be something that you guys are going to want to stay tuned for. You're going to want to follow the feeds at Rem and Sam, at Rem and Sam podcast on all the social platforms. But don't worry. Like I said, we'll be back to business as usual. And it's summertime right now, anyways. So when the man needs some time off, we got to give the man his break. And plus, it's not just Sam as well, too. There is his girlfriend involved as well. So, like, when we're gonna steal Sam away for the NFL season, we got to make sure that for these summer days, we're making sure, okay, Sam has got his free time. He's able to go out and do and hang out and have a good time. But like I said, he'll be back and we'll power through this week by ourselves. IT hanging out in the booth. Shout out. But we also got the Olympics on in the background, and we're kind of figuring out this Olympic schedule as well, too, because of course, the best way to watch the Olympics is to watch the primetime coverage. But this year as well, too, a lot of the sports live have been going on in the mornings. And I feel like with the last couple Summer Olympics, you haven't necessarily been able to watch the events twice in the same way that you had before. So Tokyo, yeah, I was looking up the time in Tokyo. Here, let's actually start with the time in Paris, because Paris, so we're recording this Friday night as usual. So Paris, it's like early morning right now when they're doing the prime time event. So they wouldn't be doing any events in 2 a.m. in the morning. But in Tokyo, so they had the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. It's like 9 a.m. right now. So I'm trying to think, were they even doing, we might have been even seeing the primetime events live in 2020. And then in 2016 in Rio, excuse me. I feel like Rio is one of those sneaky things because it's in the same hemisphere as the US. The time zone's not that different. Yeah, it's the same exact time in Rio. Oh no, wait, it's not. I'm an idiot. It's a couple hours ahead in Rio as it is in here. So I'm trying to think, were they just doing events super late as well too? But regardless, just because of the time difference, we've been able to, you've been able to watch the Olympic events in the morning. And plus, we didn't have Peacock around as well for the last Olympics to stream all the stuff in the same way, which has been pretty cool as well. But again, the best way to watch the Olympics is the primetime coverage. So I wanted to make sure I was watching the primetime coverage, but not really knowing what's happening. Like, I want to be experiencing it for the first time as well, too. I want to get excited when the stuff is happening. So the move I figured out now is in the mornings, you've got to throw on the sports that aren't going to be in the prime time. If you're locked into the table tennis, the badminton, the beach volleyball, though, once they start getting to the finals and around the, deeper into the playoffs for the beach volleyball, I think that definitely does get into prime time as well, too. But, the side sports are the ones that you've got to watch in the morning when they're live and when they're going on. And then when the primetime coverage rolls around in the evening, you skip all the swimming, all the gymnastics, and save all that stuff and just go ahead and watch it in primetime. And plus, it's worked out as well, too, where some of the primetime events the live events earlier in the day have lined up for when we're just not able to see it anyway. So in some ways, that's clutch that's worked out. Because again, we're able to lock into the primetime broadcast. And like I said, we've got it on in the background right now. And it's one of those weird days where they've got to warm up with some more background sports. They've got some finals as well, too. So you got to throw the finals on in the primetime coverage. And I think we're doing the synchronized diving finals right now, which of course the announcers in the little individual niche sports, getting to hear the announcers for the first time is one of the really clutch things. This synchronized diving color lady is just super locked in, giving great, great analysis on this synchronized dives, but also like the sneak dissing that they do as well too, because a couple of turns ago, Team USA went, and apparently not a good run from our guys over at Team USA. They said it threw us out of the competition when it happened. And when the play-by-play guys just like, you work so hard and all the hopes and dreams and you put it on the line for this moment. And it's like, okay, we know what you're getting at. It's a bummer that our Team USA is not going to medal because they were on the edge there for a second. But a couple of the other teams in the lead as well too didn't necessarily have great runs. So, like I said, I know we're not doing this live right now, but live for us as we're recording this. So we'll keep you guys updated on what's happening with the synchronized dive final. Team Australia with a really solid run for their first turn in the final. And the the color lady as well too also said on the broadcast that you forget sometimes how good this certain like Jack something, I forget what his name was, Jack, but whatever. But you forget how good, Michael Jordan is at the synchronized dive. And it's like, I don't think anybody forgot because I don't think anybody's, no disrespect. I don't think anybody's locked in on the synchronized dive for the off season period. And it's not even the off season when it's not the Olympics, but for the non-Olympic period. I don't know if people are locked in on the Australian synchronized dive team. So I don't know if necessarily anybody's forgetting this guy's talent. But like we're saying, great to see all these guys on the world stage every once they get the opportunity to showcase their talent in the Olympics. And they said we're knocked out of this synchronized dive competition, but I don't know if these other teams keep having some poor runs. Who knows if we're able to sneak back in. Did they break water at separate time? And I think the person before on the last run, I didn't know what country that was, didn't go in the water perfectly straight, which is, of course, a point deduction as well, too. But, of course, we've got to keep the Olympics on in the background. But also going on the other night, just completely around the Olympics. And I got to be honest, I went home last night, turned the Olympics on, didn't even think to watch anything else. And I didn't even realize that the Hall of Fame game was on until I saw it had gotten canceled. So apparently poor weather in Columbus, Ohio. But I saw that they stopped the game in the third quarter. But football is back. Football is excited. They were talking about it earlier in the day too at work. And, the buzz just having the NFL season finally, around the corner is got everybody super excited. But like I said, with the Olympics on, I just threw that on right away. And I was totally forgot to watch the preseason game. Did Caleb Williams even log minutes last night? I'm not even sure. But football is back. And it is officially now August. So I think it's time to start talking football. It's pretty incredible, the NBA cycle now. It does feel like the NBA news cycle is longer than the NFL cycle. And the Olympics as well too this year definitely helps extend that just because, you get basketball in the Olympics, the NBA guys are going over. And maybe in some ways as well too, just the WNBA just having basketball around and some more focused interest on the and in a professional basketball league in that summer period, like actually on the court playing versus, maybe that heightened interest not necessarily being there in the past. Maybe that's in some ways helped the NBA as well too. But you get the offseason. LeBron was a free agent. Bronny was in the draft this year. There's, a lot of big storylines to definitely talk about. But like we said, football is back. It's time to start thinking about the NFL season. And it's also that time of year to start thinking about fantasy football. And we have a tradition on the Rem and Sam pod where every year we pick one guy that we kind of like, take under our wing. We quote unquote adopt him as our, well, I guess we don't take him under our wing because he's a professional, football player. We're not necessarily showing him anything. But in terms of fantasy, we definitely buy all the stock in that guy and have that guy's back for the season and say that is our, breakout / that's just our fantasy guy for the season. Like I said, we adopt him. as our fantasy sun for the upcoming season. And shout out to the champ. Shout out to Sam, of course. Like I said, he'll be bad, but they'll maybe we'll see who they're thinking for potential breakout people as well too for this upcoming season. I'm sure it'll come up in conversation at some point, but it is a tradition on the pod, a tradition off the pod to adopt a fantasy breakout player. And that was always kind of the thing as well too with the pick. It was always kind of a breakout guy. The initial guy that we were on for his breakout season was Deebo Samuel when he initially went off and was just it peaked two-way running the football. The Niners just, peak of his powers. I think even that breakout season might have been his highest fantasy football positional ranking, like his best fantasy season to date at this point. But Deebo Samuel was the first guy that was like, oh yeah, we're all in on this guy and he's going to be a breakout player. And of course, it seemed like after that season, it was like, oh, this is a can't miss. If we got Deebo Samuel locked in, we're going to be great after that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we went Deebo Samuel, Gabe Davis, and then last year, Isaiah Hodgins. So it's just progressively gone downhill ever since the Deebo Samuel pick in year one of adopting the fantasy breakout player. But I think we're going to pick somebody, or, I think we'll at least narrow down a couple nominations this year, because I'm still a little undecided on a couple of guys, but I think we'll at least talk out a couple of the nominees. But just a bunch of the other fantasy stuff that I was looking at going through, just preparing for leagues, preparing for drafts. And like I said, it is August as well too. So I don't know typically when it's not preseason though. I feel like preseason is really when a good league might start heating up the draft, because then you go through training camp, you get all the training camp injuries out of the way. You also get some of that initial training camp buzz around certain people, and they're just vibes start to lean one way or the other. And make no mistake, I mean, preseason can shift a vibe, and then game one, game two of the regular season also very much shift a vibe as well, and the vibes can all over the place. But definitely post training camp is a really great time to have it. This time of the year in general is peak fantasy draft season. So I was going through, you got to make your big board every year, trying to figure out how to rank the guys. And I know in the past we've released the ranking on the Rem and Sam Instagram at Rem and Sam on Instagram. But if you guys want to follow over there and see if we release a ranking this year, I don't know if we'll release a full ranking, but we'll definitely post about an official breakout nomination, and definitely throw up some stuff about a couple of the other guys as well too. But like I said, just some of the stuff I was thinking about with the fantasy board this year. And I was going through the ESPN ADP as well, which is mostly where I play fantasy leagues. I know a lot of the other sites and apps and stuff are becoming more popular for fantasy. It seems like people are really branching out now. Yahoo is super popular. Sleeper. I mean, Sleeper is the dynasty app. If you don't have a dynasty league in Sleeper, it was probably not, it's probably a league of actual adults, but that definitely seems to be the trendy fantasy apps at this point, where, ESPN and even NFL.com. NFL.com was like an actual fantasy powerhouse at one point, but I feel like, does anybody play? I don't know if anybody has a fantasy league on NFL.com now. Yahoo has kind of taken that corner. I bet ESPN is probably still the leader, but the other people are definitely getting close. Does Matthew Berry have an NBC? I'm sure that they've got a fantasy platform that you can play on, but I don't think that one's broken into the mainstream quite yet. But like I said, I play mostly on ESPN. So when I'm looking at ADPs and stuff like that and looking at their player rankings, it's most of the time I'm going to be referring to how ESPN has it listed. And I think all this stuff is current as of Friday night as well, too. I've been trying to keep it updated as much as possible because I know some of the stuff is fluctuating. I don't, it's not changing by the minute, but some of the guys are, there's little trends up and down. But looking at the receiver position to start, because, we love the receivers on the Rem and Sam pod. We're pro wide receiver on the Rem and Sam pod, but right now on ESPN ADP, and I don't know if there's a pod that's like anti wide receiver, but we're definitely pro wide receiver for fantasies. But, and especially last year, we were really on like, hey, Justin Jefferson has like got to be the number one pick. And I know McCaffrey definitely held his own as the number one pick last year, but Jefferson definitely, McCaffrey and Jefferson. When Jefferson was healthy, he missed some time last year, which his overall numbers were hurt, but also the run down the season a little bit better than it was last year. So the fantasy championship game and the games that count, bigger game, maybe the performances were a little bit more important and he was able to step up. But right now so like I was saying, we're pro receiver, but right now on ESPN ADP, CeeDee Lamb is the number one overall receiver, which I definitely, he was the number one receiver last year, so it makes sense. Okay, they're going to basically run back a lot of the same pieces. I know Tony Pollard's gone. They bring back Zeke at running back. They've got, Rico Dowdle, Deuce Vaughn. Am I forgetting somebody as well, too? Let's double check and see who their starting running back is. But running back, most of the offensive line, they're going to get a little bit healthier there as well. Rico Dowdle is the starting running back right now on PFF. So, definitely going to be a running back by committee, but he might get the initial reps to start the game. But obviously from the case for CeeDee Lamb is there. And where, as I was saying last year, I was definitely like Jefferson is the number one guy and kind of in a tier of his own. I think the number one receiver this year, there's definitely more of a tier for it and some more guys that I could see the case being the number one receiver. CeeDee Lamb, obviously one of them. And let me see if his ADP is number one overall in the draft right now. I think maybe McCaffrey is still one. Oh yeah, McCaffrey is still going as the first pick on ESPN. And then CeeDee Lamb is going as the second pick. And, the receptions as well, too, if you're playing PPR, which I should also say most of the time I'm playing in a PPR league. So for the scoring, most of the time I'm referring to PPR scoring. But I feel like what's really the difference, if you're good in PPR, you're not going to be good in the non-PPR leagues. Maybe the touchdowns, if there's a weird differential, a low touch, like a Rashid Shaheed season where a guy just doesn't get a lot of touches, but scores a bunch of touchdowns. Maybe there's a little bit of a variance there. But most of the time, PPR scoring led the league in receptions last year. So that's just a big plus. The yardages were insane. And Dak Prescott in a contract year, is there going to be extra motivation there? But it says that Brian Schottenheimer was the Cowboys offensive coordinator last year. And I have no recollection of Brian Schottenheimer calling plays for this team. I thought Mike McCarthy was calling plays. There was, I know a couple seasons ago, a whole Mike McCarthy fiasco with him and the play calling duties. But apparently Brian Schottenheimer was there last year, drawing up the offense for this Cowboys team. And it worked for CeeDee Lamb, make no mistake. So like I'm saying, they're running back a lot of this team. So in theory, it's just like the same thing CeeDee Lamb's. And another thing with that high pick too, there's again, a safety element to it where the baseline of having Prescott as your quarterback, maybe with some of the other receivers, it's like, okay, that's a safety blanket from a fantasy standpoint. And CeeDee Lamb's at least going to get his decent numbers if Prescott's out there healthy. But I don't know if Brian Schottenheimer has like a rich history of great offenses. He's got a couple of decent years in there with Russell Wilson in Seattle, but I think that would have kind of been post Legion of Boom as well too. And then before Seattle, he was on the Jets, And I think he was responsible for the Brett Favre Jets team. So, make no mistake, a couple of 10-win teams, but that Cowboys team last year was, by far the best offense that he's had. And even if they're running back a lot of it, again, just the history of having him as the play caller means, is he going to be, is CeeDee Lamb still going to be the number one receiver again next year? And I should have done this research as well, too, now that I'm thinking about it. I wish I would have thought about this before, but I wonder what the odds of are a guy finishing at the number one, pause, the number one at his position 2 years in a row, back-to-back years, because it does feel like, a guy could definitely be in the top 3 for a long time, but getting that number one spot back-to-back years, it would have to be, even like Derrick Henry for running backs. Did they have fantasy when Jerry Rice was there? I mean, maybe through the newspaper, but I don't know if we're counting those leagues. And McCaffrey's had some injury things as well, too. So is Henry. So, I mean, if you're including the injury seasons, then obviously, like the 21 season when Henry played 8 games, kind of incredible that he still finished 14th. I don't think that's for PPR scoring, but on Pro Football Reference, they have him 14th in their fantasy ranking. But like finished second, finished first, had the injured season, then finished third, then finished 5th last year. So, I mean, it's like, okay, incredible running back, incredible run of dominance, but to be the number one guy at a position back-to-back years, I guess Travis Kelce might be the tight end position is a definite, probably exception to the rule, just because the depth of that position. Yeah, I mean, going back to 2016 was Travis Kelce's first season as the number one overall tight end in fantasy, but then second in 17, but then 3 years in a row as the number one, second again in 2021, then first in 2022, and then third last year in 2023. But he's back on top of ADP as the number one tight end. Let's check Antonio Brown, because the 5-year run there, half-decade run that Antonio Brown had is one of the more impressive runs that a receiver has put together. But he finished back-to-back. Yeah, really only back-to-back. He didn't do the 3 in a row like Travis Kelce. He 2014, 2015. And again, I don't think I'm looking at PPR scoring here. So if you factor in the receptions, maybe he was down to like second in one of these years. Though I doubt it. They were definitely throwing the ball to Antonio Brown, but finished 6th in 2013, but then first, third, second, and then played 1 game in 2019, finished 152nd. So back-to-back years for Antonio Brown. So I guess CeeDee Lamb could definitely have one more, like that, another just all out is the best receiver in the league season. Make no mistake. But again, the odds of a guy having that, I guess, a couple of the guys that we looked up did have it, but is CeeDee Lamb Antonio Brown level receiver? Honestly, if there is an Antonio Brown level receiver, if we're talking like who are the actual and we're not trying to sneak this CeeDee Lamb here, but like who are the generational talent at receiver playing right now? I get there is still some difference in fantasy versus the on the field thing, and it's like the receiver that I would take in real life might not always be the one that I'm going to take in fantasy because of the situation and all that. But I feel like Justin Jefferson still has to be the number one receiver in fantasy for this year. And I was going into making my big board for the receivers ready to not put Justin Jefferson at number one. I actually had a couple other guys that I was like, what's the vibe around this guy for the season? Let me double check the numbers last year. Let me look into the offseason and check the roster. And, just let me do the deep dive and see if this is like, okay, there's an actual case here that this guy is the number one. Maybe I'll admit to which one I was thinking later. It's not super crazy, but it's not a guy that's like definitely a consensus number one receiver right now. But again, I was not going into it thinking I'm going to make Justin Jefferson my number one receiver on my big board again this year. But when I looked at, I don't mean to sound like Mo Kiper doing the draft, but when I looked at his numbers without Kirk Cousins last year, I was kind of shocked because, again, he's had Kirk Cousins the last several seasons, and Cousins is one of those guys as well too. If we're talking the fantasy real life thing, where you're going to get the numbers from Cousins, but maybe the primetime thing, like we get it. Cousins is going to give your receivers production, and Jefferson's going to look good in fantasy, no doubt. But Cousins was also hurt last year, so we got that sample size with Nick Mullins and who was the other receiver? Josh Dobbs. They had said, did they trade for Josh Dobbs? Did they sign him? I forgot how Josh Dobbs got on the team. I think he just showed up. They just like made a wish out of a genie in a bottle, and Josh Dobbs appeared up. Maybe they could have used a little bit better wish. Josh Dobbs looks like a make-a-wish. IT, cut that out. But I was looking at Jefferson's numbers without Kirk Cousins, and in the 5 games that he played without him, he was 6.5 receptions a game in 100 yards a game. And that's, I said 5 games. I believe it was that first game of those 5. He got hurt or was like coming back from injury or something. Only played 13 snaps in that game. Didn't start the game. Got 2 receptions for 22 yards. And again, in that 5-game span, still managed to have a 100-yard receiving per game average. So if you just take that initial game out where he didn't get that start and just go the next 4 games that he played without Kirk Cousins, 7.5 receptions a game, 119 yards a game, and he had 2 touchdowns in 4 games, which, over the course of 16, 17 games is going to be 8-ish touchdowns, which I get the quarterback concerns at the Vikings is going to be the reason why Jefferson is not being drafted as the number 1 receiver right now. But again, you look at what he did with Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs, and it's like, hey, maybe Sam Darnold might actually be an upgrade for Nick Mullins. So this might actually be incredible for Justin Jefferson. And, I thought they geared it a little bit differently as well, too, where, hey, maybe we actually have to start, instead of maybe some of the downfield stuff that Kirk Cousins can give you, is it more the screen game and just the quick throw game and just let Justin Jefferson try to create in space and some more of that stuff, which, it's like, of course, he can absolutely do it. He's, arguably the best receiver in the league when we're just talking about, the guys that you want to take. But, 7.5 receptions in a game, let's take a look at what that is for a 17-game pace here. He's on pace without Kirk Cousins last year to have 127 receptions and over 4 yards. 119 yards a game puts him on pace for over 2,000 yards again. So maybe even without Kirk Cousins, I have to go back on my Justin Jefferson. Do you have to pull the take back out? Justin Jefferson is going to be the first receiver to have 2,000 yards, which, make no mistake, it's not a take I put away. It's just the take was that it was going to happen last season. And unfortunately, I probably jinxed him and he got hurt. But I think I also said maybe I just said in general that there was going to be a 2,000-yard receiver, and Tyreek Hill definitely came pretty close, and we were looking really good there. But again, the pace that the man was putting up without Kirk Cousins was still basically Justin Jefferson level numbers. And again, if he's not going to have 2,000 yards next year in this Vikings offense, but definitely, chalk the man up. He's going to have 100 receptions. He's going to have, and yeah, I get it. If he stays healthy, that's for all the guys, but he's going to have 100 receptions. He's going to have 1,300 yards and, 2 touchdowns over 4. Again, if he's at 8 touchdowns, maybe that's not the number 1 receiver in the league, but I think he proved last year without Cousins that it kind of doesn't matter who the quarterback is. He still is able to produce those level of numbers. And again, if we're talking about the generational talents, well, we know that Justin, that's kind of a thing that a generational talent can do, because we saw Fitzgerald do it. And it's not a thing that all generational talents have had to go through as well, too. You get a guy like Marvin Harrison gets to play with Peyton Manning for a large portion of his career. Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young. It's not like he had a weakness at quarterback for, by the time he does have any kind of weakness at quarterback, his career is well established at that point. And then even in Oakland as well, too, like what he's playing with Rich Gannon, who was the MVP of the league. Did Jerry Rice have something to do with that? Probably, yeah. Made the Pro Bowl in 02. Was this the Rich Gannon MVP year? So it's another reason why Jerry Rice is the greatest receiver, maybe the greatest football player of all time. Well, Brady, of course, is probably, the greatest football player of all time, but the greatest non-quarterback of all time. You turn Rich Gannon into the MVP of the league, and that's definitely something that helps your case. But again, Rich Gannon was a guy that was still able to be turned into something. So, and I'm not trying, no disrespect to, this is not a Rich Gannon diss track, but not, Joe Montana or Steve Young, but wouldn't say that he had necessarily to deal with what Fitzgerald dealt with in Arizona. And, I think Chris Carter is another one that maybe I was always told that he had poor quarterback play as well, too, for a large portion of his career. But there was also some was it Culpepper or Cunningham? Or no, Warren Moon. Played a little with Warren Moon. Warren Moon's Viking run. How could I forget? But the Vikings have just a sneaky, fun QB history. Fran Tarkington, Warren Moon. Like I said, Cunningham played for the Vikings. And then there's one more guy that I'm thinking of. Oh, Culpepper, like I said, as well, too. That's a pretty good stack of quarterbacks to have. Again, if you think, obviously some franchises have had all-time great quarterback. The Patriots have had Tom Brady, but the Patriots don't have the depth of quarterbacks like the Vikings do. Unfortunately, the Vikings don't have a Super Bowl. But is this do we write this down for summer 2025? The QB, the ultimate QB franchise rankings? We might know the Packers are one, but the Colts are also in the mix as well, too. Unitas going way back. You got Burt Jones, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. Now we got Anthony Richardson. Jim Harbaugh made an AFC championship game with the Colts. So, I mean, we've got our stacked list of guys as well, too. But yeah, Cunningham was on the Vikings from 97, 98, 99, had that first team All-Pro season in 1998. But if there's any receiver in the league that it's like, okay, I'm willing to look past their quarterback play and just rank him just rank him based on the talent regardless, then it is Justin Jefferson. And I think I just would do it. I just would take him as my number one receiver off the board this year. And again, I get the Cowboys thing, but the Dak contract thing is also, maybe it motivates him to play really well, just that contract year season that guys have. But there is also a vibe of the message that maybe the Cowboys sent about the faith that they have in Dak Prescott, and how does that translate into performance and into cohesion into the locker room and into just, confidence all around. Does that mean that they're more confident in Mike McCarthy than they are Dak Prescott? And, Trey Lance is there as well, too, if things go really, really south. So there is a tinge of, and not even that, maybe it's a little bit more. There is, I think, some decent signs that, okay, there is a chance that the Cowboys season could go off the rails. I have to beat around the bush saying it because it's the Cowboys. I think they could go off the rails pretty easily, but I wouldn't be, again, I think that percentage chance is there. And I don't really know what going off the rails is for the Vikings. Because again, they have Sam Darnold at quarterback and they have McCarthy, who, I guess if McCarthy is just of course we don't think this, but we're just, looking at all the angles. If McCarthy is like a disaster rookie option, if they trot him out, if and when they trot him out there at some point, then I guess that is the disaster season. But in terms of like a win and just an overall like numbers for the offense or whatever, just nobody really, I think, expects them to be a high level winning team next year with that quarterback situation. Like I said, I think Jefferson, the yardage, the receptions, and he'll find the end zone enough times to be, a top end fantasy player. That I don't think will matter for him. But just for the expectations for the team, they're already kind of low. So I don't know if there's going to be a bad vibe if there's things not necessarily going well because they're in a rebuild. Whereas the Cowboys, if things go bad, then hey, is Trey Lance in? Is Dak not motivated? Is Mike McCarthy out? There are more question marks to me about the Cowboys going south than the the Vikings already south can't get there. But also, there's a couple other guys above Jefferson, not just CeeDee Lamb. Jefferson right now is ADP wide receiver 5. And again, I think I honestly get the case for like 6 or 7 of these guys to be the number 1 receiver in fantasy next year. But 4 guys over Jefferson right now in ESPN mocks. And Tyreek Hill is the number 2-1 behind CeeDee Lamb. And again, I don't think anybody's been more pro Tyreek Hill the last couple of years on the field than the Rem and Sam pod. I mean, like we've said, Jefferson is maybe the best receiver in football, but I think Tyreek Hill's speed, maybe he's the guy, and then maybe that's just the single, maybe most game-changing element that any receiver has in the NFL right now. But he's going to cross that 30-point threshold or that 30-year-old threshold. And I don't know if it's a concern in terms of like, is Tyreek Hill going to fall off this year? Wouldn't necessarily say that at all, but it is definitely a thing. It's like, definitely a little note to put on the receivers when they are entering at this portion of their career. And I don't know if it's not him being like a good or relevant fantasy player. I think he's going to be a top 10 receiver again this year, but how long is Tyreek Hill going to be a top 5 fantasy receiver? And again, I don't want to be like I'm throwing out the hot take summer storylines. It's, the nitpicky thing of, hey, if I'm taking this guy second in my draft, again, like with CeeDee Lamb and like I was saying with Justin Jefferson, I also need him to have that safety element as well too, where, could this be a season where Tyreek Hill is like the 7th best? And maybe that is a great safety element for the number 2 receiver off the board. It probably is. And I'm probably being a little bit too nitpicky, but, and again, just being in the 30-year-old season, just that, not being like an Adam Thielen or, you got Mike Evans, Diggs. There's a couple of older guys in the league. He just is turning 30 this year. It's probably a little bit overreaction, but I don't think anybody's ever been the number 1 fantasy receiver at 30. And sorry, I shouldn't say that. My IT says my notes only go to 2006 for this, and then in 2007 would be the last time that a receiver over the age of 30 finished as the number 1 fantasy receiver. And I want to say too was Marvin Harrison. Maybe 2006 and 7 is probably Randy Moss. Ooh, Randy Moss, is that another guy to go back-to-back number 1s? Pause. And Vikings receiver, Jefferson, I don't know if he would have done it on the Vikings, but no. So in 2007 he was the number 1 fantasy receiver, and then in 2008 he was the number 10 receiver. 2009 he was the number 2 receiver. We're talking about Randy Moss. But 2006 he was the number 58 receiver because he only played 13 games that year. So we'll double check here. The last, or I guess, we were reading them in the wrong order too. Our notes are all over the place. So Randy Moss would have been the last receiver. We are correct there to be over 30 and be the number 1 fantasy receiver as well. So is Tyreek Hill a great receiver like Randy Moss? I mean, obviously we're not saying we're ranking him over Moss, but yes, he is a Hall of Fame receiver. Randy Moss is also a Hall of Fame receiver. And Marvin Harrison at 34 years old in 2006 was the number 1 overall fantasy receiver that year. 95 catches, 1,366 yards, and the 12 TDs is probably what put him over the top, though. I don't think he led the league. He was second in Owens, but Owens had 13 touchdowns, but only 85 catches. and 1,100 yards that season. So one of the rare seasons that a guy at that stage in his career and even finished in the top 5, let alone getting up there to first. But it's just something I have, starting. It's like, okay, now we're starting to at least keep an eye on Tyreek Hill, and it's something in the back of our minds. And also the last 2 seasons with Miami, he's had at least 119 receptions and 1,700 yards. So that's just like, an incredible bar that he's setting for himself to reach. And again, at some point there is going to be a little changing of the guard and a reshuffling where, Tyreek Hill, hey, another amazing season. Like we're saying, he's the 7th and 8th fantasy receiver. He's got like 1,400 yards. Also, a fully healthy Waddle again, hopefully. And him as just a overall bigger part of the offense. The run game is, they're definitely focusing on bulking that up. And, maybe they're just not trying to be, well, they probably are trying to be a full aired out team with the speed that they have. But, you get that maybe they're just trying to implement a little bit more balance where, again, he's not going to get into that 1,700 yard range, but we're not going to be the ones to sit here and doubt Tyreek Hill for sure. But I would still consider Jefferson over Hill and Chase over, Jefferson over Hill. And they also have Chase over Jefferson, which Burrow versus the quarterbacks on the Vikings. It's like, okay, of course, there's no chance. And if you also consider the fact that, I think it's still a very likely possibility that T. Higgins gets traded, maybe as somebody without sources, and that somebody that hasn't looked at a Cincinnati blog in a couple of weeks. I probably shouldn't say that, but, I guess none of us would be shocked to hear if T. Higgins got traded within the next, 3, 4, 5 months, in the season at some point. If a team trying to bulk up the thing is like, hey, we'll give you the contract. And the Bengals also drafted a receiver, so they're clearly ready to gear up when T. Higgins moves on. Oh, my computer's dying. Sorry, folks. We got to take a timeout and plug in the laptop. And we're back. I realized I was not keeping you updated on the Olympics at all. And I was not keeping myself updated. I have no idea who won the synchronized dive competition, but the track and field athletics have started up. We've got a mixed 4x4 relay going on right now. We've got a heat. I don't know if Team USA is in this one, but there's 2 laps to go, and we've got a tight 3-man race out front, riveting action to kick off the track and field events. But I forgot what we were talking about. But I think we just got him ripping apart Tyreek Hill. But anyways, in our quest to defend Justin Jefferson as the number one as the number 1 fantasy receiver this year, Tyreek Hill is above him. And Jamar Chase. Oh, yeah, Jamar Chase. So T. Higgins, that's what it was. We were talking about T. Higgins getting traded, which I think at one point, shout out to our guy Fataport, rest in peace, the old Fataport Twitter account. But I think at one point he had thrown out a Justin Jefferson for T. Higgins trade. So if Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson ended up on the same team via trade, who knows what we'll have to do from a fantasy standpoint to reevaluate those 2 guys. But, I know saying this after a season that Jefferson was hurt might not be the best point, but Chase has not necessarily been a hallmark of health for his career. Played, I guess 17 games his first rookie year, then 12 games, and then 16 games last year, 100 receptions. Yeah, still had an incredible season last year. 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. It's just the bar that he set for himself. Second team All-Pro that rookie season. Kind of incredible that he hasn't been a first team All-Pro receiver at this point. I get he's only 3 years into his career, but just for one, shows you how stacked the receiver position is. And I honestly don't know if it's registering like what Jefferson is doing, what Justin Jefferson is doing to start his receiver career. These first 4 or 5 seasons. Of course, we're not gonna get the page loading here for Justin Jefferson, but I don't know if he was an All-Pro his rookie year, but he was, I believe, an All-Pro by his second year and definitely won the last couple of years. So already at this point, Tyreek Hill, 5-time All-Pro, but here we might have to switch over to the phone. But I guess CeeDee Lamb too. I'm just trying to remember off the top, but CeeDee Lamb would have been the other All-Pro receiver last year. I guess Jefferson wouldn't have been yet because he got hurt. So I'm just giving him the spot without just because of the talent. But 2 years ago, the insane season would have been the year that he was definitely first team All Pro. I guess, yeah, only the one time for just see shows you again just how stacked the receiver position is. But the one time last year, and then 2 times second team All Pro. So he's been the second team his rookie and then his sophomore season. Then yeah, last year, 10 games played, 9 starts. Still kept the 1,000-yard streak going. So for the Pro Football Reference page, it's just going to, for however long that goes, it's just going to be incredible to see that stack up. But that's the other part that just the consistency, that season to season 1,000-yard production is pretty insane. I guess Jamar Chase also doing it as well, too. He has a chance to add to it this season. So to be honest, there's not, maybe Jamar Chase is the guy. As I was saying, we're talking this out. Maybe Chase is the one where if situation is going to affect it to the point where it starts bumping Jefferson down a couple of levels, then Chase is the guy that we have to look at as the immediate contender for the number 1 spot for our wide receiver big board. I would be okay with that. I would be okay with putting Jamar Chase there. But again, maybe the little bit of an injury thing. But like, I guess what I meant to say earlier too with T. Higgins is if he gets traded, then just the usage for Jamar Chase at that point, could just go spike way up because the Bengals have the ability to develop talent at that receiver position. And in the long term, I think have good solutions at that spot. But just for next season, I think Jermaine Burton, they got in this draft. I don't know if he's going to step in and be above average level starter his rookie season in the NFL. Chase at that point would, I don't want to say obviously be the number 1 receiver, but it would be hard for him without T. Higgins. And they also lost Tyler Boyd this offseason as well, too, to not see his production just go through the roof. So again, as we're talking this out, maybe it's a tentative 1A, 1B between, of course, the 2 transcendent LSU guys, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase. But the other player right now, the 4th one that is sitting above Justin Jefferson in the ESPN ADPs is our guy. Again, one of our all of these guys are our guys, but another one of our guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown. And let's see where he finished last year with Detroit. But they lost Josh Reynolds, who was like a sneaky good addition for him. I guess not an addition, but, player for him at receiver last year. They're going to have Jameson Williams in that number 2 receiver role. And he's an interesting guy to keep in mind as we're looking for a breakout guy. But, Amon-Ra first team All Pro last year. So I guess he was the 3rd guy slipping on. Let's get a fact check on this first team All Pro from last season. We've got CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown as the 3 AP guys. The second teamers, Brandon Ayuk, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua, Mike Evans, also on second team All Pro for the receiver spot. So I guess they had 4 second team receivers and 3 first team receivers. But I remember asking Champ at one point if he would trade Amon-Ra St. Brown for any receiver in the league. And we're obviously talking about the elite couple of guys, but it's like, hey, would you trade Amon-Ra for Jefferson? Would you trade him for Chase? Would you trade him for Tyreek Hill? CeeDee Lamb? That AJ Brown, is Puka in that elite group as well too? that short list of guys, is there anybody on that list you'd be willing to swap Amon-Ra out for? And he was like, honestly, not really. Like, I get the extra maybe athletic dynamics that you bring to the table with a guy like Chase, just I get the special elements that all the other guys have, but he was like, Amon-Ra does exactly what all those guys do. He does exactly the impact that you want a number one receiver to have, the clutchness as well too. I feel like just his ability at the end of games, he's on the top of the list for receivers that I trust in a big moment. And, Goff in that short game as well too. Again, I wouldn't be totally surprised if he's back in the mix as a top 5 guy again, but is he going to be the number one fantasy receiver? Because I feel like with all these guys, and same with the running backs as well too, which looking at the time, I don't know how much more in the big board we're going to get into. We're not just going to sit here. Sam's not here, so there's no reason to go for 3 hours. We might have to restart after that pause, but we'll keep it to a decent time. But Jefferson is one of the guys where even with the quarterback situation, I could still see him being the number one fantasy receiver in the league. Maybe he just gets, there's just an insane like percentage of touchdowns that he scores where maybe the Vikings are probably not going to be a super high scoring offense, I would guess. But maybe, Sam Darnold, it's an adequate offense and Jefferson's just scoring all the touchdowns and still at the top of the list. Like Jefferson, yeah, if nobody's shocked if he's number one, nobody's shocked if Chase is number one. CeeDee Lamb was number one last year. So like we're saying, I wouldn't be shocked if CeeDee Lamb was number one this year. And even Tyreek Hill wouldn't be shocked if he was number one. Is Amon-Ra going to be the number one receiver? And again, it's just the nitpicky stuff that we think about. But as I'm trying to figure out the top of this big board for the receivers, I mean, all this stuff does matter. So I think as it sits, I think as we've talked this out as well, too, I think we'll put Chase number one. We'll put Chase number one, not to get too crazy. We're back. Our computer didn't die. The Wi-Fi cut out. I see you need all the pieces to work together. It's like the offensive line, just if the 4 guys are blocking right, but the left guard does something, then all of a sudden, you still might give up the set. IT. We need all the pieces to work together to get this to go. But I think I would go, I said not to be crazy, and then we got cut off. Maybe it was crazy, but Jamar Chase, number 1, Jefferson 2, Amon-Ra 3, CeeDee Lamb 4, Tyreek Hill. We also have AJ Brown on the board, who we didn't mention. And I guess if you've made it this far, it's fair that I be honest to you guys. AJ Brown is the other guy that I was like, okay, is this the guy that's going to be the number 1 receiver this year? Because he had that run last year where, I mean, for a month stretch there, we were like, he is the best receiver in the league. And the Eagles add Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. Last year was the Super Bowl hangover year. I don't know, is Jalen Hurts going to be, I don't want to say like more locked in or whatever, but, just are they going to clean up the stuff? I know the Jason Kelce loss is, not ideal for that team, obviously, but they're going to be better this year. They're going to be more firing on offense with Kellen Moore there. And if we're talking about safety, I really trust AJ Brown to be a top 5 level receiver. And I remember last year, my fantasy draft as well, too, the board didn't fall the way I wanted it to. And I ended up, quote unquote, panicking and picking AJ Brown. Because that's just, AJ Brown is just my default. If he's there, it's like, oh, I guess I'm just going to take AJ Brown and I'm going to be totally okay at the receiver position. So, he's also, like I said, in the mix for number 1. I could see him being over Jefferson, and I would be more okay with him over Jefferson than Hill and CeeDee Lamb. He's the ADP number 6 receiver right now. So do we go Chase, Jefferson, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra at 4? Maybe Amon-Ra at 4. We take everything bad we said about him back. Amon-Ra at 4 is the perfect spot. We'll keep him there. Then CeeDee, and then Tyreek Hill. See, I mean, we reshuffled the guys. To me, that doesn't even sound like a crazy order to put him in. But you look at, you just put out whoever is, whoever's at the bottom of that list, it's like, oh, Tyreek Hill, you got him at 6. Oh, CeeDee Lamb, you got him at 6. Jefferson, you got AJ Brown. It's too stacked at the top to try to sort it all out. And that's like my tier 1 for receiver. But like I said earlier, Puka Nacua is the ADP number 7 receiver right now on ESPN. And, you know, maybe he's like, with my Amon-Ra St. Brown case, maybe he's not the number 1 receiver in the league. But I mean, if you're going to be like, he's number 2 or 3 and he's even better than he was in year 1 going into year 2, I could totally see that as well too. Having Cooper Kupp back, just Kyren Williams fully healthy, you know, having the offense fully clicking, fully healthy. Carson Wentz was starting at quarterback last year. Having everybody back for a sustained period of time, where I think really the Rams could be a sneaky, dangerous team if everything's clicking next year. He has to be in the mix. Garrett Wilson at ADP 8. This is where, okay, do we get a tier cut off here? It's like, is Puka Nacua and Garrett Wilson a tier, or is Puka Nacua in a tier? Because again, like AJ Brown, I'm not putting him in a different tier than a guy like CeeDee Lamb. To me, no, they're all the same player. I get there's going to be, you know, pick your guy. There's going to be stat variance. But to me, they're all the same. The same upside is there with all those guys. So if you think Puka's in a tier with a guy like Brown, then he's in the conversation to be the number 1 receiver on the board. So you know, if you want to put him in there, you can definitely talk me into it. But as of right now, I would settle on those 6 guys to be in the conversation. And I think I kind of like the ranking that we settled on there as well too. Chase, Jefferson, Brown, Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill. And we'll definitely reconsider CeeDee Lamb, make no mistake. And Tyreek Hill as well too. And maybe we just queued up next week's episode or Tuesday's episode as well too, because we've got to at least have one more episode before Sam gets back with his guest this week. Sam, get back quick, please. The people are asking for you. We need you back soon. But I guess this is just the case for Justin Jefferson to be the number 1 receiver pod. Like I said, we were going to do some Fantasy Sun stuff and just some more stuff in general. Anthony Richardson QB1. IT, cut that out. We'll tease that better here. 3, 2, 1. Why Anthony Richardson? Screw it. We'll get the tease next week and come up with something else. But we've got more fantasy stuff in the pipeline, ready to go for the month of August. I don't know if August is just going to be fantasy month, but if it takes us 6 players at a time to work to the big board, then it just might be. But football's on the horizon. The NFL season, college football, it's all ready. It's all right here. I'm still in Olympic brain, so can't wait to go fire up the rest of this prime time and the Kevin Hart, Keenan Thompson highlight show. Shout out. Been a great thing to watch at night. And then table tennis. It's just table tennis in the morning, basketball, prime time, Kevin Hart, beach volleyball. It's a great Olympic schedule. The Peacock thing where you can go back and just the whole library of all the sports are there and you can replay just all the events. No mistake. We haven't put in the time to be able to do that yet. I think even the most dedicated Olympic person would be pretty crazy to. Why? I wonder who's watching the most Olympics out there. Can we get slide in the DMs with your Olympic watch time count, and we'll see who's got the biggest number. But we'll try to go add to it right now, and we will be back with you guys, like we said, on the Tuesday episode, and then the Rem and Sam return on Friday. Okay, we were about to wrap up, but we got this Bleacher Report notification. Apparently, the NFL Network's dropping their the top 10 portion of their top 100 player ranking. They dropped it tonight. I didn't realize the start time for this was a couple minutes ago. We're not locked in on the top 100 NFL Network broadcast portion of it, but they did reveal the top 10 players here. And I guess we didn't do a piercing truth either. So here we go. We got a perfect piercing truth to wrap up the pod. My bad for not having piercing truth. IT, we hire you to remind me of these things. Why can't you do your job? But we'll power through and do the corner here. The top 10 players for the NFL. This was for last season. And I know there's too many cuts in this one. Sorry. We'll clean it up next time, but we had to react to this list. I guess we'll start with number 10. We've got, and this, like I said, I think I said for last season, but I think it's a little big picture. I guess the players just vote however they want to vote. They end up just voting for their own guys. But Max Crosby is 10. Travis Kelce's 9. TJ Watt, 8. Trent Williams, Chris Jones, Myles Garrett, 5. So we're in the top 5. Pat Mahomes, 4. Christian McCaffrey, 3. Lamar Jackson, 2. And Tyreek Hill, 1. So the guy we just did a whole episode on him, we just put him number 6 in our wide receiver fantasy rankings going into next season, was just voted the number 1 player in the league. Maybe we put ourselves in piercing truth. But Pat Mahomes at 4. Guys, what are we doing? The Pat Mahomes disrespect this offseason, it has to stop. The Chiefs, they have all the signs of collapse. We've seen what's been going on with the team this year. The receiving core, it's been chaos. It's not been good. But the Raiders are now out here in practice with the Kermit the Frog puppet, and now the other players are voting him the 4th best player in the league. Do we want him to get the three-peat? I mean, I get the way to beat the guy is just to, build a better team, but also let's not give these great players motivation to go out and try to wipe every other team off the map, because Mahomes is not the 4th best player in the league. And that's not disrespect to anybody on this list. That's just, we know the man has been to the Super Bowl basically every year. He's arguably the greatest just quarterback talent the league has ever seen. And the resume that he has at this point is already, I think, a lot higher on that all-time list than people. It's kind of registering with people right now. The rest of this, I don't know. The Pat Mahomes thing is kind of glaring. And I imagine, are we going to have to watch First Take over the Olympics tomorrow? I guess tomorrow is Saturday, so that will not be happening. But when the weekend is over, I feel like that could be a topic of conversation. And Lamar was the MVP of the league, the first team All-Pro quarterback. I'm not necessarily, we all get that if he's that spot on the list, that makes a ton of sense as well, too, just from a politics standpoint. But also, we also understand what we would do if we were running a team and we just had to redraft the league. And I just don't want to give these guys that don't really need bulletin board material more bulletin board material. And I think the three-peat motivation and that sort of legacy stamp and what kind of greatness that could just, sort of cement for him already at this stage in his career, but just as for a legacy would be probably enough motivation for him already. But now to be like, hey, you guys don't even think I'm the best player in the league. What is going on? The regular season playoff dynamic, I think, is going to be something interesting to discuss. I think it'll be interesting to hear what Sam says about it for this upcoming year with this team. But maybe now there's a regular season dynamic where he's totally locked in. And like we said as well, too, he cut the Raiders Christmas Day win out of the Netflix documentary. So maybe they earned that one, the Kermit the Frog puppet. Maybe it was just retaliation. But come on, guys. I get he just beats up on the league every week, but is it petty to have Pat Mahomes as the 4th best guy in the league? Myles Garrett as the best defender in the league. So the defender list, we've got Myles Garrett, Chris Jones, TJ Watt, and Max Crosby. I mean, I'm not mad at that at all. Obviously, Aaron Donald retired. So if you're ranking guys from this past season, would there be hey, one last year, is he still a top 10 guy in the league? I think the case is still strong, but Max Crosby has taken his game to a whole nother level. Let's see if we can pull up like the teens in the 20s. We're just going to end up pulling up the whole list for the NFL top 100. But a guy like, is Fred Warner, you wouldn't just say like Fred Warner's a top 10 player in the league, but Fred Warner versus Max Crosby, those are two. That's the Rem and Sam All-Pro team right there, for sure. But that's a tough debate on guys that you want to have. And the edge rush position, super important. We get it, but no corners. And the corner I'm thinking of is Sauce. So that's why I'm curious to see where the teams fall at. Oh, so pulled up the list. and I'm pretty sure this is the NFL.com one. Yeah, so this news is on a blog. It's on the Sporting News, but this is the NFL.com top 100 list. And Fred Warner is 11. So, like we said, the Fred Warner Max Crosby debate is super close. Josh Allen, because Fred Warner was, or Max Crosby was 10. Fred Warner 11, Josh Allen 12, CeeDee Lamb 13, George Kittle 14, Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Micah Parsons, of course. We're still getting back into football brain. We're remembering the guys. Roquan Smith, 19. CJ Stroud, 20. Penei Sewell, 22. Amon-Ra St. Brown, or sorry, AJ Brown, 21. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 23. They had Jalen Ramsey as the number 1 DB. Sauce Gardner at 38. So Sauce might be a little motivated as well, too. Sauce behind Tua. Tua voted 36. Sauce, Deron Bland at 31. Sauce at 38. Purdy over Sauce. Like we said, Jalen Ramsey as well, too. So obviously top 10 player in the league is probably a little aggressive. Micah Parsons at 17, I think, is definitely in the mix for that 10 spot as well. Roquan Smith has games. Where's Kyle Hamilton on this list? Let's see where Kyle Hamilton is, because can we get odds on will Kyle Hamilton be top 10 on the NFL top 100 next year? Because I will take those odds. He is 43. So it would be a good enough jump where I think plus odds you could snag DRF. Let's cook up that prop bet and get plus odds on Kyle Hamilton to make that jump, because I want to make some money on it. I could definitely see that happening. Yeah, man, he is already like a top 5 defensive player in the league already. I feel like the players not watching tape at young blood. I feel like, he needs to get his bearings, but there's still some other young guys up high on this list. I mean, Stroud at 20 was a rookie last year, so clearly maybe youth has nothing to do with it. Just Kyle Hamilton, Sauce Gardner, the DBs. Come on, the DB. We need a DB renaissance. The DB position has garnered some disrespect over the last couple of years. That do we have the legendary guys? Remember when we had Ed Reed? Remember when we had Troy Polamalu? And make no mistake, those were great times. Nostalgic and wish I could go back and relive those days. But I love the defensive backs that we have right now. Sauce Gardner, Kyle Hamilton, all these guys are great players. So maybe there's something to prove there at that position as well. But I guess that'll be our piercing truth for the night. And no more cuts, no more segments. IT, is that it? Soccer Corner, UFA. We got the playoffs next week, like we said, so nothing going on in the UFA. There's probably other stuff going on in Frisbee, but that's Sam's specialty. That's, of course, why we love having him here for more than just Frisbee Corner, obviously. But Frisbee has been a great addition to the pod, and to my sports collection, whatever repertoire, whatever the right term for it is. Viewing the sports rotation is probably the right way to put it. A great add to the sports rotation for sure. But that'll do it. Yes. The Rem and Sam pod on Instagram, Rem and Sam podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, podcasts, whatever social media platform it is. We're out there at Rem and Sam podcast. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be back on Tuesday, the solo episode, one more, and then we'll be back with Sam with the guest next weekend. Stay tuned for that. So thank you guys for listening. Have a good night.